after a fan sent him a racist letter backstage. Steve Harvey broke his silence. What began as a night filled with laughter quickly transformed into a moment that would challenge the very fabric of his character. How does a beloved figure respond when faced with a venomous attack from someone who claims to support him? In this gripping narrative, we delve into the emotional turmoil of a man who, despite his fame, confronts the harsh realities of hate and the power of his voice. Stay tuned, because what follows will not only reveal Steve's strength, but also illuminate a struggle that resonates with us all. As the applause faded and the lights dimmed, Steve Harvey felt the familiar rush of excitement coursing through his veins. The cheers of the audience still echoed in his ears, a testament to the connection he had forged with the crowd that night. He was a titan in the entertainment world, a man who had conquered comedy, television, and motivational speaking, captivating millions with his charisma and wit. But tonight, something sinister lurked in the shadows, threatening to overshadow the joy of his performance. The energy in the room was electric, filled with laughter and joy, as fans celebrated the man who had brought them so much happiness. They stood, applauding with genuine admiration, but little did Steve know that darkness was about to invade his world. As he basked in the glow of his success, he was blissfully unaware of the storm brewing just outside the spotlight. Moments later, as he stepped off the stage, still riding the high of the performance, Steve was handed a letter by a stagehand. At first glance, it seemed like an ordinary fan letter, perhaps a heartfelt note of appreciation or a request for an autograph, tokens of love from someone who had enjoyed the show. His heart swelled with gratitude, and he smiled, ready to read the kind words. But as he unfolded the paper, his expression shifted dramatically. His heart raced, and a chill ran down his spine as the words sliced through his joy like a knife. The letter was not a celebration. It was a venomous attack, a barrage of racial slurs and hatred that left him momentarily speechless. This wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a stark reminder that, even in the limelight, darkness could invade, and that not everyone celebrated his success. The words were laced with venom, revealing a deep-seated animosity that he had hoped was fading in society. Each line felt like a punch to the gut, and he struggled to process the reality of what he was reading. As he stood there, grappling with the content of the letter, Steve felt a wave of emotions crash over him: anger, sadness, disbelief, and a profound sense of betrayal. This wasn't just a letter. It was a call to action. In that moment, he realized he had a choice to make: to remain silent and let the hate fester, or to confront it head on. The weight of the decision loomed over him, heavy with the knowledge that his response could either empower or disempower those who faced similar attacks. But what he didn't know was that this moment would change everything. It would ignite a fire within him that he never knew existed, pushing him to become a voice for those who felt voiceless. In the days that followed, Steve would grapple with the implications of his response, knowing that he had a platform and a responsibility to use it wisely. This incident would not only challenge his personal beliefs, but also force him to confront the societal issues that he had long sought to address through his comedy and public speaking. But this was just the beginning of his nightmare, and the journey ahead would test his resilience in ways he could never have imagined. After a restless night, haunted by the words of a stranger, Steve made a decision. He would not let hate go unchallenged. The letter had shaken him to his core, but it also ignited a fire within that demanded action. He would use his voice, an instrument that had resonated with millions, to stand against the darkness that sought to divide and belittle. The weight of his decision was heavy, Yet the resolve that accompanied it felt empowering. Morning light filtered through his window, casting a warm glow that contrasted sharply with the turmoil inside him. As he sat at his kitchen table, sipping coffee, he reflected on the events of the previous night. The laughter of the audience still echoed in his mind, but now it was tainted by the venom he had received. It was a stark reminder of the world outside the bubble of applause and admiration, a world where hatred still thrived. Steve began to prepare for the public address he had decided to make. He knew the stakes were high. This wasn't just another performance. This was a pivotal moment in his life. He was about to confront a world that often turned a blind eye to racism and hate. He thought about the people who looked up to him, who found inspiration in his words. Would they stand with him, or would they turn their backs? The uncertainty weighed heavily on him as he rehearsed his speech, pacing the floor of his living room. As the day of the press conference approached, Steve found himself oscillating between confidence and doubt. He was no stranger to the spotlight, having spent decades in front of cameras and audiences. Yet this felt different. He was stepping into uncharted territory, ready to challenge not only the hate that had been directed at him, but also the broader societal issues that lay beneath the surface. Finally, the day arrived. The atmosphere at the venue was charged with anticipation. Media representatives from across the country had gathered, eager to hear what the beloved comedian and television host had to say. As he walked onto the stage, his heart pounded in his chest. The bright lights felt blinding, but he could still make out the faces in the crowd. Some were familiar, fans who had followed his career, and others were journalists armed with cameras and notepads, ready to capture every word. "Thank you for being here," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Today, I stand before you not just as a comedian, but as a man who has been confronted with the ugly reality of hate." He paused, allowing the gravity of his words to sink in. "Recently, I received a letter filled with racism and vitriol. Words that are not just directed at me, but at everyone who looks like me, who has ever felt marginalized or belittled because of their skin color." The audience shifted, their attention sharpening. He could see expressions of concern, empathy, and understanding ripple through the crowd. Steve continued, the passion building in his voice. "This kind of hatred has no place in our society. It's time we confront it head-on, not just in public figures, but in our everyday lives. We need to create a world where love and acceptance triumph over hate and division." As he spoke, the energy in the room shifted. People leaned in, captivated by his words. The applause that erupted was not just for him, but for the message he was delivering, a collective acknowledgement of the need for change. He was no longer just a man on stage. He had become a voice for many, a symbol of resilience in the face of adversity. But as the applause faded, Steve felt a wave of anxiety wash over him. The battle had just begun. Would his message resonate beyond the stage? Would it inspire others to confront their own biases and the systemic racism that persisted in society? He knew that while this was a step forward, it was merely the beginning of a much larger conversation. The media coverage following the press conference was extensive. News articles, social media posts, and television segments dissected his speech, analyzing every word and gesture. Support poured in from fans and fellow celebrities, many expressing solidarity and gratitude for his courage. Yet, amidst the outpouring of support, there were also critics. Voices that questioned his motives, accused him of seeking attention, or dismissed his message as overblown. Steve found himself at the center of a media frenzy, facing a public that was now divided. The support felt empowering, but the backlash was unsettling. He had expected some resistance, but the intensity of the criticism took him by surprise. It was as if some were determined to undermine his message, to twist his words into something that could be ridiculed. In the face of this adversity, Steve's resolve only strengthened. He reminded himself that this wasn't just about him. It was about everyone who had faced hate, who had felt the sting of prejudice. He doubled down on his commitment to amplify his voice, refusing to be silenced by those who sought to diminish his message. He began to engage more actively with his followers on social media, sharing stories of resilience and encouraging others to speak out against hate. As the days turned into weeks, Steve found solace in the conversations he had with fans, friends, and family. He listened to their stories, their struggles, and their triumphs. Each discussion revealed different facets of the human experience with racism, and the emotional toll began to weigh heavily on him. It was a stark reminder that the fight against hate was far from over. Through these conversations, Steve realized that his experience was not an isolated incident. It was part of a larger narrative, one that connected him to countless individuals who had faced similar challenges. He discovered that by sharing his story, he was helping to forge an unexpected bond between himself and his community. Together, they were building a network of support, a collective force against the darkness that threatened to engulf them. Yet, the unity he found came with its own challenges. Friends expressed their concern. Some even questioned the risks of speaking out. They worried that the backlash could jeopardize his career, that this moment could turn into his downfall. The doubts crept in, and for a brief moment, he found himself grappling with fear. What if the hate was stronger than the love? What if he had miscalculated? But through the doubt, Steve found strength. He realized that he was not alone in this fight. Fans rallied behind him, sharing their own stories of hate and resilience. The outpouring of support fueled his determination. He understood that the fight against racism was a collective effort, one that required unity and action. As he continued to engage in discussions about race, Steve also began to explore ways to use his platform for greater impact. He reached out to organizations dedicated to combating racism and promoting inclusivity, eager to collaborate and amplify their messages. He wanted to be part of the solution, to help foster understanding and empathy in a world that so desperately needed it. Through this journey, Steve discovered a newfound purpose. He was not just a comedian entertaining audiences. He was a catalyst for change, a voice for those who felt voiceless. He understood that by speaking out, he could inspire others to do the same, to confront the hate that existed in their own lives and communities. As he prepared for his next public appearance, Steve felt a mixture of excitement and trepidation. He knew that eyes were watching, waiting for him to falter. But he had come too far to turn back now. The fire within him burned brighter than ever, propelling him forward into the unknown. With each step, he felt the weight of his responsibility, but also the exhilaration of possibility. He was ready to break the silence, to challenge the status quo, and to inspire others to join him in the fight against hate. It was a journey that would not be easy, but it was one he was determined to undertake. The world was listening, and Steve was ready to speak out. As news of Steve's statement spread, the media took notice. Headlines blared across news outlets, and social media erupted with a fervor that was both exhilarating and daunting. Support poured in from fans who applauded his bravery, many sharing their own experiences with racism and hate. It felt as though a wave of solidarity was surging through the nation, uniting voices that had long been silenced. Yet, amidst the chorus of support, critics emerged from the shadows, ready to attack. The initial thrill of his public stand began to wane as the reality of backlash set in. Perhaps it was inevitable. After all, Steve knew that speaking out against hate would not come without consequences. Yet, he had hoped for a more unified response. Instead, detractors questioned his motivations. Some even twisted his words to fit their narratives. Social media platforms became battlegrounds, with heated debates erupting in comment sections and on news forums. The backlash was swift and unrelenting. "Why is he playing the race card?" one commenter wrote on a popular social media platform. "He's just trying to stay relevant and make a name for himself." Another post claimed, "This is just another celebrity trying to gain attention. He doesn't really care about the issues." Each notification on his phone felt like a jab. Reminders that not everyone was willing to embrace the message he had hoped would inspire change. The vitriol poured in, and it was disheartening to witness the division his words had inadvertently stirred. Steve found himself at the center of a media frenzy, facing a public that was now divided. Television pundits dissected his speech, analyzing every inflection in his voice, questioning his sincerity and intent. The scrutiny was intense, and although he had faced criticism before, this felt different. The stakes were higher, and he was acutely aware that this battle was not just about him. It was about everyone who faced the kind of hate he had experienced. As the storm brewed around him, Steve took a moment to reflect. He sat in his office, surrounded by memorabilia from his career, a reminder of the journey he had taken to reach this point. Pictures from his early days in comedy, awards lining the shelves, and messages from fans who had found hope in his words all served as a backdrop to the chaos. He thought about the people who had supported him through thick and thin, who had celebrated his victories and encouraged him during setbacks. They had always believed in the power of his voice. And now, in this moment of crisis, he needed to hold on to that belief. His resolve only strengthened as he grappled with the overwhelming emotions of the moment. "This isn't just about me," he thought. "It's about everyone who has faced hate." He understood that his voice had the potential to inspire action, to create dialogue that could lead to real change. He decided to double down, amplifying his message rather than retreating in the face of adversity. In the days that followed, Steve began to engage more actively with his supporters. He took to social media, sharing personal anecdotes, encouraging dialogue, and inviting others to share their stories. He hosted live Q&A sessions, addressing questions and concerns from fans. The response was overwhelming. People thanked him for speaking out, for bringing attention to issues that often went unaddressed. He felt a renewed sense of purpose as he connected with individuals who were eager to join him in the fight against hate. But the media scrutiny continued. Every time he stepped out in public, cameras flashed and questions flew. Reporters were eager to catch him off guard, to elicit a controversial soundbite that could be spun into a headline. "Do you think your comments have gone too far?" one journalist probed during an interview. "Are you worried about losing fans over this?" Steve remained calm, responding with grace and conviction. "I'm not afraid to speak the truth," he said. "If my words challenge someone, then maybe that's a good thing. Change doesn't come from comfort. It comes from uncomfortable conversations." Each time he reiterated his message, he felt the weight of responsibility lift slightly. He was not just defending himself. He was advocating for a cause greater than himself. Despite his efforts, the backlash began to escalate. Some media outlets launched campaigns to discredit him, questioning his character and motives. A particularly scathing article labeled him a race baiter, claiming that he was using his platform for personal gain. The word stung, but Steve refused to let them define him. He reminded himself of the support he had received, the countless messages from people who had shared their own experiences of hate. He knew that behind the negativity, there was a movement growing, a desire for change that could not be silenced. Then came the most devastating news of all. Amidst the turmoil, a close friend and confidant reached out to him, expressing concern about the impact of his stand. "Steve, I just want you to be careful," they said, their voice laced with worry. "This could seriously affect your career. People are talking, and not all of it is good." The conversation felt like a punch to the gut. He had always valued this friend's opinion, and hearing their doubts shook him to his core. Steve took a deep breath, grappling with the reality of what was unfolding. He understood the risks involved in speaking out, but the thought of retreating felt like giving in to the very hate he was fighting against. He had spent his life building a career on authenticity and connection, and to backtrack now would feel like a betrayal, not just to himself, but to everyone who had ever felt marginalized. That night, as he lay in bed, the weight of doubt crept in. What if this moment turned into his downfall? What if the backlash overshadowed the positive change he sought to inspire? The question swirled in his mind, and for a brief moment, he felt the urge to silence his voice, to retreat into the safety of anonymity. But that thought was quickly dismissed. He had come too far to turn back now. The following day, Steve decided to take action. He gathered his team for an emergency meeting, determined to strategize how to navigate the backlash while amplifying his message. "We need to be proactive," he asserted, his voice steady. "I won't let this define me. We need to turn this into a movement." His team responded with renewed energy, brainstorming ways to engage with the community and harness the momentum of support. In the days that followed, Steve sought comfort in conversations with family and friends who had stood by him through thick and thin. Each discussion revealed different perspectives on the impact of racism, the emotional toll it took on individuals, families, and communities. He listened intently, gathering insights that would shape his understanding of the broader conversation surrounding race and prejudice. Through these discussions, Steve began to see the complexity of the issue. He realized that while he was facing backlash, there were countless others who faced far worse consequences for speaking out. He heard stories of individuals who had lost jobs, friendships, and opportunities simply for standing up against injustice. The emotional weight of these stories resonated deeply with him, fueling his resolve to continue the fight. During one particularly memorable conversation with a longtime friend, Steve learned about the struggles faced by the younger generation. "You know, Steve," his friend said, "the kids today are so brave. They're willing to speak out in ways we never could. But they also face a lot of backlash, much more than we did." This revelation struck a chord within him. He recognized that his platform could be used to uplift these voices, to advocate for those who felt silenced. One evening, he met with a group of friends for dinner. As they shared laughs and stories, the conversation shifted to the current climate of social justice. "You know, Steve," one friend said, "you're doing something really important. It's not just about you, it's about creating a space for dialogue." The comment struck a chord within him. He realized that by breaking the silence, he was helping to foster an environment where others could share their experiences too. This unity brought with it a renewed sense of strength. He felt a growing determination to harness this momentum, to push forward rather than retreat. The support from his community was a powerful reminder that change was possible, and together, they could challenge the status quo. He began to draft ideas for future projects, initiatives that could promote understanding and empathy and provide platforms for marginalized voices. As he mapped out his plans, Steve also took time to reflect on his own journey. He thought about the influences that had shaped him, the mentors who had guided him along the way, and the people who had inspired him to use his voice. He understood that his platform came with a responsibility to uplift others, to create opportunities for those who had been silenced for too long. With each passing day, the initial shock of the letter and the subsequent fallout began to fade. He was still facing challenges, but he felt more equipped to navigate them. The criticism, while painful, became a source of motivation. He no longer saw it as a barrier. Instead, it was a call to action, a reminder that the fight against hate was ongoing. As he prepared for his next public appearance, Steve felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. The pressure mounted, but rather than let it overwhelm him, he chose to embrace it. He understood that the world was watching, waiting for him to falter, but he was ready to rise to the occasion. He had a message to share, and he would not be silenced. The day of the event arrived, and as he stood backstage, he reflected on how far he had come. The applause from the audience filled the air, a reminder that he was not alone in this fight. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. This was more than just another performance. It was a chance to amplify the voices of those who had been marginalized, to challenge the hate that persisted in society, and to inspire change. With renewed purpose, he stepped onto the stage, ready to break the silence and confront the darkness head-on. As the spotlight illuminated him, Steve felt a surge of energy. He was not just a comedian. He was a voice for change, a beacon of hope in a world that so desperately needed it. The audience's cheers echoed in his ears, a reminder that he was not in this fight alone. "I'm here tonight, not just for myself," he began, his voice resonating with conviction, "but for all of us who have ever faced hate, who have ever felt the sting of prejudice. We must rise together, and we must do so with love in our hearts." The words hung in the air, powerful and poignant, as he continued to rally the audience around the cause, urging them to take action in their own communities. In the days that followed Steve's public statement, the world seemed to shift around him. The initial surge of support from fans and fellow celebrities had felt invigorating, but the subsequent backlash had cast a long shadow over his spirit. He sought comfort in conversations with family and friends, hoping to find solace from the emotional storm that had taken hold of him. Each discussion revealed different facets of the human experience with racism, and the emotional toll began to weigh heavily on him. Steve found himself reflecting on his own life experiences, growing up in a world that often viewed him through a lens of prejudice and bias. He had faced moments of discrimination, but nothing prepared him for the intensity of the hate he had recently received. The letter had opened old wounds, reminding him of the struggles faced not just by himself, but by countless others. One evening, he gathered with a close-knit group of friends at his home. The atmosphere was warm and inviting, filled with laughter and the aroma of food simmering in the kitchen. They were sharing memories, recounting stories of their early days in comedy, and reminiscing about the laughter that had brought them together. As they laughed, Steve felt a sense of comfort wash over him, but he could sense the tension lurking beneath the surface. As the conversation shifted toward current events, Steve could feel the weight of the world pressing down on him. His friends shared their stories of encountering racism, each tale a testament to the pervasive nature of hate in society. "You know, Steve," one friend said, "I've faced my share of discrimination, but hearing your story makes me realize just how far we still have to go." Their words resonated deeply, and Steve felt a mixture of validation and sorrow. "Steve, you're brave for speaking out," another friend said, his voice filled with admiration. "But I worry about the consequences. What if this backlash jeopardizes your career?" The concern was palpable, and Steve felt a pang of anxiety at the thought. What if his stand against racism would indeed cost him opportunities? What if the very people he had entertained for years turned against him? Steve took a deep breath, trying to gather his thoughts. "I get it. I really do," he replied, looking around at the faces of his friends. "But I can't stay silent. There are people out there who feel just as I do, who have experienced hate in ways I can't even imagine. If I don't use my voice, then what's the point of having it?" His words hung in the air, resonating with the truth of his conviction. Yet, the weight of doubt still lingered. As supportive as his friends were, he couldn't shake the fear that this moment could turn into his downfall. The media had a way of twisting narratives, and he was now at the center of a storm that had escalated beyond his control. The thought of losing everything he had worked for, his career, his reputation, and the love of his fans, felt like a heavy anchor pulling him down. As the days turned into weeks, the emotional toll of the letter's impact began to ripple through his relationships. While many rallied behind him, some friends expressed their concern more forcefully. "Steve, maybe it's time to lay low for a bit," one suggested during a private conversation. "You don't want to make things worse." The suggestion felt like a retreat, a denial of the very fight he had chosen to embrace. He understood their intentions were rooted in love and concern, but he couldn't help but feel that stepping back would mean conceding to the hate. Steve spent countless nights tossing and turning, grappling with the dichotomy of his situation. On one hand, he had the support of many who admired his courage. On the other hand, the fear of backlash loomed large. As he lay awake, he recalled his childhood, moments of feeling left out or belittled because of the color of his skin. He thought about the lessons his parents had instilled in him about resilience and the importance of standing up for what is right. Those lessons had shaped him into the man he was today, and he knew they would guide him through this tumultuous time. During one particularly sleepless night, Steve decided to take action. He reached out to his therapist, a woman who had been a guiding light in his life for years. They had worked together on various personal issues, but this felt different. He needed to process the whirlwind of emotions, the anger, sadness, and fear that had taken root within him. In their session, Steve spoke candidly about the letter and the subsequent fallout. "It's like I'm caught in this whirlwind," he confessed, his voice trembling. "I want to speak out, to be a voice for change, but I'm terrified of the consequences." His therapist listened intently, offering validation and insights. "It's natural to feel conflicted," she assured him. "You're standing at the intersection of personal responsibility and public perception. It's a heavy burden to carry." Through their conversations, Steve began to realize that the emotional toll he was experiencing was not just about him. It was about the collective struggle against racism. He was part of a larger narrative, one that connected him to countless others who had faced similar challenges. Each story he heard, every message of support he received, reinforced the notion that he was not alone in this fight. Days turned into weeks, and Steve found himself increasingly involved in discussions about race and social justice. He began attending community meetings, engaging with activists, and listening to the voices of those who had been marginalized. Each conversation deepened his understanding of the complexity surrounding racism and the need for systemic change. He was learning that while his voice mattered, it was also crucial to amplify the voices of others who had been silenced for too long. One evening, he attended a town hall meeting focused on addressing racial inequality in their community. As he sat among a diverse group of individuals, he felt a sense of unity. People shared their experiences, their pain, and their hopes for a better future. Steve listened intently, taking notes and absorbing the gravity of their stories. Each account was a reminder of the work that lay ahead, and he felt a growing urgency to be part of the solution. When it was his turn to speak, he stood before the crowd, his heart racing. "I've been given a platform, and I want to use it to elevate the voices of those who have been silenced," he began, his voice steady. "We cannot ignore the realities of hate and discrimination. It's time for us to come together, to stand united against the forces that seek to divide us." The room erupted in applause, and for the first time in weeks, he felt a surge of hope. In the days that followed, Steve continued to engage with the community, participating in marches, discussions, and events aimed at promoting unity and understanding. He felt invigorated by the collective energy and passion of those who were committed to the cause. The fear that had once gripped him began to dissipate, replaced by a newfound determination. Yet, even as he found strength in community, the impact of the letter continued to reverberate in his personal life. Friends still expressed their concerns, and some distanced themselves from him, unsure of how to navigate the changing landscape. It hurt to feel the shift in relationships, but he reminded himself that change often came with sacrifices. He had chosen to stand up for what he believed in, and that meant accepting the possibility of losing some connections along the way. One afternoon, Steve received a message from a young comedian who had been inspired by his words. The message read, "Your courage has given me the strength to speak out about my own experiences with racism. Thank you for being a voice for us." Reading those words filled him with gratitude. He realized that despite the challenges he faced, his actions were resonating with others and sparking conversations that needed to happen. As the weeks turned into months, Steve's commitment to the cause deepened. He began collaborating with organizations dedicated to addressing racism and promoting social justice. He organized events that brought together individuals from different backgrounds, fostering dialogue and understanding. These gatherings became a space for sharing experiences, educating one another, and building connections that transcended racial divides. Through this journey, Steve discovered that the fight against hate was not just a personal battle. It was a collective effort that required unity and action. He recognized that while his voice was important, it was equally vital to create platforms for others to share their stories. He began hosting workshops and panel discussions, inviting individuals from marginalized communities to speak about their experiences and offer insights on how to combat racism. As his efforts gained momentum, Steve encountered both support and resistance. Some applauded his commitment, recognizing the importance of addressing these issues head-on. Others, however, questioned his motives, accusing him of capitalizing on the situation for personal gain. The criticism stung, but he reminded himself of the greater purpose behind his actions. He was not in this for himself. He was fighting for those who felt voiceless. With each passing day, Steve felt a growing sense of responsibility. He was not just a comedian. He was now a catalyst for change, a voice for those who had been silenced. He understood that the journey ahead would not be easy, but he was ready to face the challenges head-on. The emotional toll of the letter had transformed into a driving force, propelling him to advocate for justice and equality in ways he had never imagined. As he prepared for his next public appearance, Steve felt a mixture of excitement and trepidation. The pressure mounted, But rather than let it overwhelm him, he chose to embrace it. He understood that the world was watching, waiting for him to falter. But he was ready to rise to the occasion. He had a message to share, and he would not be silenced. On the day of the event, Steve stood backstage, his heart pounding with anticipation. The applause from the audience filled the air, a reminder that he was not alone in this fight. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. This was more than just another performance. It was a chance to amplify the voices of those who had been marginalized, to challenge the hate that persisted in society, and to inspire change. As he stepped onto the stage, he felt a surge of energy. The spotlight illuminated him, and he was ready to break the silence and confront the darkness head-on. Today, we gather not just to celebrate our differences, but to confront the hate that seeks to divide us, he began, his voice resonating with conviction. We are stronger together, and it's time to rise up against the forces of intolerance. The audience erupted in cheers, and in that moment, Steve knew he was not just a comedian. He was a voice for change, a beacon of hope in a world that so desperately needed it. The fight against hate was far from over, but together, they could forge a path toward understanding and compassion. As the event unfolded, Steve shared his reflections on the journey he had taken, the challenges he had faced, and the lessons he had learned. He spoke about the importance of vulnerability, of being willing to share one's story, and how that could create a ripple effect, inspiring others to do the same. When we speak out, we shine a light on the darkness, he said passionately. And in that light, we find connection, understanding, and the power to change the world. In the days that followed, the event sparked renewed conversations across social media and news outlets. Clips of Steve's speech went viral, resonating with audiences far beyond his immediate circle. People from all walks of life shared their own stories of encountering hate, and many expressed gratitude for Steve's willingness to confront such a difficult issue. Feeling the momentum, Steve decided to launch a new initiative, a series of community workshops focused on storytelling and healing. He wanted to create safe spaces where individuals could come together to share their experiences, learn from one another, and build solidarity. The workshops would focus on the power of personal narratives to foster empathy and understanding, helping to bridge gaps between different communities. As he rolled out the initiative, he was heartened by the response. The workshops filled up quickly, drawing participants from various backgrounds eager to engage in meaningful dialogue. Steve facilitated discussions, encouraging participants to share their stories and guiding them through exercises designed to help them articulate their experiences. Through these workshops, he witnessed the transformative power of storytelling. One participant, a young woman named Maya, shared her experience of growing up in a predominantly white neighborhood, where she often felt out of place. "I always felt like I had to hide who I was to fit in," she admitted, her voice trembling with emotion. "But hearing everyone's stories made me realize I'm not alone. We all have our struggles, and it's okay to be proud of who we are." As Maya spoke, Steve could see the impact of her words on the other participants. They nodded in agreement, some wiping away tears as they connected with her vulnerability. It was moments like these that reinforced his belief in the importance of these gatherings. They were not just workshops. They were healing spaces where individuals could come together, find strength in one another, and collectively challenge the hate that permeated society. However, the initiative also faced challenges. Some community members expressed skepticism about Steve's motives, questioning whether a celebrity could truly understand the complexities of racism and social justice. "He's just in it for the publicity," One detractor wrote in a local forum. What does he know about our struggles? Rather than allowing the criticism to deter him, Steve took it as an opportunity to engage in dialogue. He began reaching out to local leaders and activists, seeking their perspectives and inviting them to co-facilitate workshops. He wanted to ensure that the initiative was grounded in the community's needs and experiences, rather than being driven solely by his own narrative. As he collaborated with others, Steve learned valuable lessons about humility and the importance of listening. He realized that while his platform could amplify voices, it was crucial to step back and allow others to take the lead. This shift in perspective deepened his understanding of allyship and the role he could play in supporting marginalized communities. Despite the challenges, the workshops flourished. Participants began to form connections, building friendships that transcended racial and cultural divides. They shared meals, laughter, and tears, fostering a sense of community that had been sorely lacking in their lives. Steve watched as individuals who had once felt isolated started to find a sense of belonging. As the initiative gained traction, Steve also recognized the importance of documenting these stories. He decided to create a podcast series, inviting participants to share their experiences in their own words. We need to capture these narratives, he explained during a planning meeting. It's not just about my voice. It's about amplifying the voices of those who have been silenced for too long. The podcast quickly gained a following, resonating with listeners who were eager to hear authentic stories of resilience and hope. Each episode featured personal accounts of overcoming adversity, navigating racism, and finding strength in community. Listeners reached out to share their reflections, expressing gratitude for the vulnerability and honesty showcased in each story. Through the podcast, Steve discovered the profound impact of storytelling on a broader scale. The narratives shared became a source of inspiration for many, sparking conversations and encouraging individuals to confront their own biases. He received messages from listeners who felt compelled to take action in their own communities, inspired by the courage of those who had shared their stories. As the months wore on, Steve found himself at the forefront of a movement that had far exceeded his expectations. He realized that the fight against hate was not just about one man's journey. It was about a collective struggle for justice and equality. He felt a profound sense of gratitude for the individuals who had joined him on this journey, each contributing their unique perspectives and experiences. However, as the movement gained momentum, so did the scrutiny. The media continued to monitor his every move, eager to catch him making a misstep. Some critics intensified their attacks, questioning his authenticity and motives. He's just riding the wave of social justice for his own gain, one commentator wrote in a scathing op-ed. Steve felt the sting of the criticism, but he also recognized that it was a reflection of the larger societal tensions at play. He reminded himself that challenging the status quo often invited resistance. Instead of retreating, he chose to double down on his commitment to the cause. He knew that the fight against hate was not easy, but it was necessary. As he prepared for his next public appearance, Steve felt a mixture of excitement and trepidation. The pressure mounted, but rather than let it overwhelm him, he chose to embrace it. He understood that the world was watching, waiting for him to falter, but he was ready to rise to the occasion. He had a message to share, and he would not be silenced. On the day of the event, Steve stood backstage, his heart pounding with anticipation. The applause from the audience filled the air, a reminder that he was not alone in this fight. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. This was more than just another performance. It was a chance to amplify the voices of those who had been marginalized, to challenge the hate that persisted in society, and to inspire change. As he stepped onto the stage, he felt a surge of energy. The spotlight illuminated him, and he was ready to break the silence and confront the darkness head-on. Today, we gather not just to celebrate our differences, but to confront the hate that seeks to divide us. He began, his voice resonating with conviction. We are stronger together, and it's time to rise up against the forces of intolerance. The audience erupted in cheers, and in that moment, Steve knew he was not just a comedian. He was a voice for change, a beacon of hope in a world that so desperately needed it. The fight against hate was far from over, but together, they could forge a path toward understanding and compassion. As the event unfolded, Steve shared his reflections on the journey he had taken, the challenges he had faced, and the lessons he had learned. He spoke about the importance of vulnerability, of being willing to share one's story, and how that could create a ripple effect, inspiring others to do the same. When we speak out, we shine a light on the darkness, he said passionately. And in that light, we find connection, understanding, and the power to change the world. The audience was enthralled, hanging on his every word. He spoke of hope, resilience, and the importance of standing together against hate. Every story he shared was a reminder of the strength found in community, and the applause that followed each point reinforced the notion that they were in this together. As the event came to a close, Steve felt a sense of fulfillment wash over him. He had taken his pain and transformed it into something powerful, an opportunity for change. Looking out at the sea of faces, he felt a renewed commitment to the cause, knowing that this was just the beginning of a much larger journey. As Steve stepped off the stage, the adrenaline from the event still coursed through his veins. The applause echoed in his ears, a resounding affirmation of his commitment to fighting against hate and discrimination. He felt a mixture of relief and exhilaration, knowing that he had successfully conveyed his message and inspired others to join the cause. But as the lights dimmed and the crowd began to disperse, he also felt a weight settle on his shoulders. The work was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. In the weeks that followed, Steve dedicated himself to expanding his outreach efforts. He recognized that while his voice was powerful, it was crucial to create platforms for others to share their stories as well. With this in mind, he began planning a series of events aimed at fostering dialogue between diverse communities. The goal was simple yet profound: to bridge the gaps between people from different backgrounds and experiences, to cultivate understanding and empathy. Steve reached out to local community leaders, activists, and organizations focused on social justice. He wanted to collaborate, to ensure that the events were inclusive and reflective of the communities they aimed to serve. During one particularly fruitful meeting, he sat down with Maria, a passionate activist known for her work in racial justice. We need to create spaces where people can come together to talk about their experiences, Maria emphasized, her eyes sparkling with conviction. It's not just about sharing stories, it's about building relationships. Absolutely, Steve agreed, feeling invigorated by her enthusiasm. I want to create a series of workshops and discussions that empower individuals to speak out, to share their narratives, and to learn from one another. Together, they brainstormed ideas, discussing potential themes for the events, ranging from personal storytelling to addressing systemic racism in their community. As they mapped out the logistics, Steve felt a renewed sense of purpose. He envisioned events that would not only educate, but also inspire action. They would include panel discussions featuring diverse voices, interactive workshops, and opportunities for participants to engage in meaningful dialogue. The aim was to create an environment where individuals could feel safe to express themselves, share their experiences, and connect with others who had faced similar challenges. In the months that followed, Steve and Maria worked tirelessly to bring their vision to life. They secured venues, created promotional materials, and reached out to potential speakers. The response was overwhelmingly positive. People were eager to participate and contribute to the conversation. As the first event drew near, Steve felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. He wanted everything to be perfect, knowing that the success of the initiative would depend on creating a welcoming and inclusive atmosphere. On the day of the event, he arrived early to help set up, arranging chairs in a circle to encourage open dialogue. He greeted attendees as they arrived, noticing the diverse group of individuals, young and old, from various racial and cultural backgrounds, who had come together to participate. The event kicked off with a welcome speech from Steve, who stood before the crowd feeling a sense of responsibility wash over him. "Thank you all for being here today," he began, his voice steady. "This gathering is about more than just sharing our stories. It's about building bridges between our communities. We may come from different backgrounds, but we all share a common humanity." The audience responded with nods and murmurs of agreement, and Steve felt a surge of hope. As the event progressed, individuals began to share their stories. Raw, honest, and often painful accounts of their experiences with racism and discrimination. Each narrative added a layer of depth to the conversation, and Steve was struck by the common threads that emerged. One participant, a young man named Amir, recounted his experiences as a Muslim in a post-9/11 world. "I faced so much discrimination simply because of my faith," he shared, his voice quivering. "People see my hijab and make assumptions about who I am. But I'm just like everyone else. I want to live my life in peace." His words resonated deeply with many in the audience, and Steve could see heads nodding in empathy. As Amir spoke, another participant, a woman named Linda, chimed in. "I can relate to that," she said, her tone earnest. "As a Latina, I've faced my own share of prejudice. People often judge me based on the color of my skin, not knowing my story." The dialogue flowed naturally, with participants building on each other's experiences. It was a powerful reminder of the shared struggles that connected them, and Steve felt a sense of unity envelop the room. The event became a safe space where individuals could express their fears, frustrations, and hopes without judgment. As the discussions continued, Steve facilitated the conversation, guiding participants toward solutions and actions they could take within their own communities. "What can we do to combat these issues?" he asked, encouraging the group to brainstorm ideas. "How can we support one another and create a stronger, more inclusive community?" Ideas began to flow, and soon participants were suggesting initiatives ranging from community outreach programs to advocacy efforts aimed at raising awareness about racism and discrimination. The energy in the room was palpable, and Steve felt a renewed sense of hope as he witnessed the power of collective action. As the event came to a close, participants exchanged contact information, eager to stay connected and continue the conversation. Steve felt a profound sense of fulfillment, knowing that they had taken the first steps toward building lasting relationships and fostering understanding. He realized that these events were not just about sharing stories. They were about creating a movement that could affect real change. In the weeks that followed, Steve continued to host similar events, each one building on the momentum of the last. He saw firsthand how the conversations sparked by these gatherings began to ripple out into the community. People who had once felt isolated started to connect with one another, forming networks of support and solidarity. However, not everyone embraced the initiative with open arms. As the events gained visibility, some community members expressed skepticism about Steve's motivations and questioned whether a celebrity could genuinely understand the complexities of racism. "What does he know about our struggles?" one critic wrote in a local forum. Rather than allowing the criticism to deter him, Steve took it as an opportunity to engage in dialogue. He reached out to local leaders and activists, inviting them to co-facilitate workshops and discussions. By doing so, he aimed to ensure that the initiative was grounded in the community's needs and experiences, rather than being driven solely by his own narrative. During one of these collaborative meetings, Steve sat down with a group of activists who had been working on racial justice issues for years. "We appreciate your efforts, but we want to make sure that our voices are heard in this process," one activist said firmly. "It's important that this initiative reflects the community's needs and concerns." Steve listened intently, recognizing the validity of their concerns. "I want to amplify your voices, not overshadow them," he assured them. "Let's work together to create spaces where your experiences and insights can guide our discussions." As they collaborated, Steve learned valuable lessons about humility and the importance of listening. He realized that while his platform could amplify voices, it was crucial to step back and allow others to take the lead. This shift in perspective deepened his understanding of allyship and the role he could play in supporting marginalized communities. Despite the challenges, the workshops flourished. Participants began to form connections, building friendships that transcended racial and cultural divides. They shared meals, laughter, and tears, fostering a sense of community that had been sorely lacking in their lives. Steve watched as individuals who had once felt isolated started to find a sense of belonging. As the initiative gained traction, Steve also recognized the importance of documenting these stories. He decided to create a podcast series, inviting participants to share their experiences in their own words. "We need to capture these narratives," he explained during a planning meeting. "It's not just about my voice. It's about amplifying the voices of those who have been silenced for too long." The podcast quickly gained a following, resonating with listeners who were eager to hear authentic stories of resilience and hope. Each episode featured personal accounts of overcoming adversity, navigating racism, and finding strength in community. Listeners reached out to share their reflections, expressing gratitude for the vulnerability and honesty showcased in each story. Through the podcast, Steve discovered the profound impact of storytelling on a broader scale. The narratives shared became a source of inspiration for many, sparking conversations and encouraging individuals to confront their own biases. He received messages from listeners who felt compelled to take action in their own communities, inspired by the courage of those who had shared their stories. As the podcast continued to grow, so did Steve's commitment to the cause. He began exploring ways to expand the initiative beyond their local community. "What if we could take this concept to other cities?" he proposed during a team meeting. "Imagine the impact we could have if we could engage with diverse communities across the country." His team responded enthusiastically, brainstorming ideas for a national tour that would bring the workshops and discussions to various cities. They envisioned a traveling series that would include performances, panels, and community engagement initiatives aimed at addressing racism and fostering understanding. The excitement in the room was palpable, and Steve felt a renewed sense of purpose as they mapped out the logistics. As they planned the tour, Steve reached out to fellow comedians and activists, inviting them to join him on this journey. He wanted to create a diverse lineup that reflected the richness of the communities they would be visiting. "It's important that we have a variety of voices represented on this tour," he emphasized. "We want to create an inclusive space where everyone feels welcome to share their experiences." The response was overwhelmingly positive. Comedians, writers, and activists expressed their eagerness to participate, and soon the lineup was set. The tour would feature performances that blended comedy with powerful storytelling, creating a space for laughter, reflection, and dialogue. As the tour approached, Steve felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. He knew that they were embarking on a significant journey, one that would require vulnerability and openness from everyone involved. He also understood that the conversations they would be having might be uncomfortable at times, but he was ready to embrace that discomfort. The day of the first show arrived, and Steve stood backstage, his heart racing with anticipation. The venue was packed with people from various backgrounds, all eager to engage in the conversation. He took a deep breath, reminding himself of the importance of this moment. This was an opportunity to create change, to foster understanding, and to build bridges between communities. As the show unfolded, Steve was struck by the energy in the room. Laughter echoed as comedians took the stage, sharing their experiences in a way that was both humorous and poignant. The audience responded with enthusiasm, creating an atmosphere of connection and camaraderie. Interspersed between the performances, panel discussions featured activists and community leaders who shared their insights on the pressing issues of racism and discrimination. They discussed their personal experiences, the challenges they faced, and the hopes they had for the future. Steve felt a sense of pride as he watched the conversations unfold, knowing that they were making a difference. After the show, attendees were encouraged to participate in breakout sessions where they could engage in smaller group discussions. Steve moved from group to group, listening to the powerful stories being shared. Individuals opened up about their experiences with racism, vulnerability etched across their faces. It was a testament to the power of creating safe spaces for dialogue. One participant, a young woman named Tasha, shared her story of growing up in a predominantly white neighborhood. "I always felt like I had to hide who I was to fit in," she admitted, tears brimming in her eyes. "But being here tonight and hearing all of your stories makes me feel like I'm not alone." Steve watched as others nodded in understanding, their expressions reflecting empathy and solidarity. In that moment, he realized that the tour was not just about raising awareness. It was about creating a community of support where individuals could find strength in one another. As the tour continued, Steve and his team traveled to various cities, each stop bringing new stories and perspectives. He felt a growing sense of connection to the diverse communities they encountered. The laughter and tears shared during each performance reinforced the notion that they were all part of a larger narrative, one that transcended individual experiences. However, the tour also presented challenges. In some cities, they faced pushback from individuals who were resistant to the conversations about race and discrimination. Steve encountered critics who questioned the validity of their message, arguing that discussions about racism were unnecessary or divisive. During one particularly tense Q&A session, a member of the audience challenged Steve directly. "Why should we talk about racism? Isn't it just a thing of the past?" The question hung in the air, and Steve felt the weight of the moment. He took a deep breath before responding, knowing that this was an opportunity to educate and inform. Racism is not just a thing of the past. It's a present reality for many people, he explained, his voice steady. We can't ignore the systemic issues that continue to affect marginalized communities. By confronting these issues, we can work toward a more equitable future for everyone. His response sparked a heated discussion, with audience members from different backgrounds sharing their perspectives. Some expressed their agreement, while others remained skeptical. But what struck Steve was the willingness of individuals to engage in dialogue, to express their thoughts, and to challenge one another. It was a reminder that meaningful conversations often required discomfort and vulnerability. As the tour progressed, Steve witnessed the transformative power of dialogue. People began to connect in ways that transcended race and background, He saw friendships forming, collaborations emerging, and a sense of community taking root. The laughter and tears shared during each event became a source of healing, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. In the final city of the tour, Steve felt a mix of nostalgia and gratitude. Reflecting on the journey they had taken, he was overwhelmed by the connections they had forged and the stories they had shared. The tour had not only raised awareness about racism, it had created a movement grounded in empathy and understanding. As he stood backstage before the last performance, he took a moment to reflect on the impact of their work. He thought about the individuals who had bravely shared their stories, the laughter that had filled the rooms, and the conversations that had sparked change. He felt a sense of pride in what they had accomplished, knowing that they had created a space for dialogue that would continue long after the tour ended. The final performance began, and Steve stood before the audience, feeling a surge of emotion. "Tonight, we celebrate the journey we've taken together," he began, his voice filled with conviction. "This tour has been about more than just comedy. It's been about building bridges, fostering understanding, and creating a community that stands together against hate." The crowd erupted in applause, and Steve felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. He knew that the work was far from over, but he felt hopeful for the future. Together, they had taken significant steps toward addressing racism and discrimination, and he was committed to continuing the fight. As the show came to a close, Steve encouraged the audience to carry the message forward. "Let's continue to have these conversations, to share our experiences, and to support one another," he urged. "Change happens when we come together, when we listen to one another, and when we stand up against hate. Together, we can create a world where everyone feels valued and respected." With that, the audience rose to their feet, applauding and cheering. Steve felt a profound sense of fulfillment, knowing that they had created a moment of connection that would resonate long after the lights dimmed. After the performance, attendees mingled, sharing their thoughts and reflecting on the impact of the evening. Steve moved through the crowd, engaging with individuals who had shared their stories. He felt a deep sense of appreciation for the community that had formed, a testament to the power of vulnerability and connection. As he prepared to leave the venue, Steve took a moment to soak it all in. The laughter, the tears, and the conversations had created a tapestry of experiences that would forever shape his understanding of the world. He knew that the fight against hate was ongoing, but he felt empowered by the relationships they had built and the stories they had shared. In the days following the tour, Steve continued to engage with the community, hosting additional workshops and discussions. He felt a sense of responsibility to keep the momentum going, to ensure that the conversations sparked during the tour would continue to flourish. Through social media, he encouraged individuals to share their experiences and insights, creating a virtual space for dialogue and connection. The response was overwhelming. People from across the country began to engage, sharing their stories and offering support. As he navigated this new chapter of his journey, Steve felt a growing sense of purpose. He recognized that while the fight against racism was complex and multifaceted, it was also filled with moments of hope and resilience. Together, they could continue to build bridges, foster understanding, and create a world where everyone felt valued and respected. With renewed determination, Steve embraced the challenges ahead, knowing that the work was just beginning. He was ready to face whatever came next, fueled by the stories, connections, and shared experiences that had illuminated his path.